Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 243. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Daniel from the Inscriber, Jacob from Jab Hook. We'll have some guests joining us later. What's going on, fellas?
What's up?
Hey,
Uh, for what you need in the live YouTube chat, listening to us live, you asked the question about joining the show. Check your personal Facebook link your personal Facebook. I left the links to join the show there. For those who are new, Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find any and all information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. Check the right of the blog page. You'll find links to where to find us all over social media and to find us and to find the podcast on all available platforms that carry podcasts minus Spotify. And I'm working on that. I'm working on putting up Pound for Pound Box Report on Spotify. So be patient with me. Also, link to the donate button, to two donate buttons. Let donation be the best nation. Look to the right of the blog page. You'll find links to the Cash Me and PayPal donate button. So, dollar, $5, $10, $2. I don't care what. If you have any spare change on you, please shoot some to the Pound Pound Box Report because there are very little things that are free, including the production of the podcast. And I want to thank Jacob while he's on here. I want to thank Jacob for the recent donations to Pound for Pound Box Report. Let's get the show started by recapping the fights that took place over the weekend. Want to go to Barclays triple header that took place over in Barclays, headlined by Bryan Castano fighting Erislandy Lara, junior middleweight title, WBA version, I believe it was. I'm going to you first, Jacob. Fight in it in a draw. Here's the question. First of all, give your analysis of the fight, your breakdown. But here's the question for me. Castano employed for most of the fight a strategy that reminded me somewhat of what Jarrett Hurd employed. Physical style, came forward on the front foot, went to the body whenever he could. Um, Given how Lara was not able to get away at times against a Castano, who I think is a level below Jarrett Hurd, not nearly as big. Do you think that we're starting to see some signs of physical decline on the now 35-year-old Erislandy Lara? So your breakdown of the fight, and then answer the question about is age starting to creep up with one Erislandy Lara?
So breakdown of the fight. I personally had Lara winning that fight. Actually, pretty comfortably. Castano was landing body shots, but I thought a lot of the punches that he was throwing was hitting a lot of the gloves of Lara. Like I think he was doing a good job of um, picking those off. He got hit to the body a few times. So good body work from Castano, but I thought Lara's left hand he couldn't miss with it. He was, that straight left, he just kept on hitting them pretty clean. Some nice counters, but what I've noticed with Lara though, to kind of transition to the second part of your question, is that he was more of like kind of a boxer mover, that Cuban style before, and he was highly criticized early on in his career, and he's had some tough, his fight with Paul Williams. I think that ended in I think it was a loss that he got, but a lot of people thought that he won that fight. The Canelo fight, of course, but he seems to kind of change his style. He's more inclined to kind of stay in the pocket and try to counter and rather than move. He got himself caught a lot, like against the ropes or in the corners, which I don't think was a traditionally his style before. But I thought he did really good work. Like I said, I think a lot of the shots did hit a lot of the gloves, with the exception of the body shots that Castano landed. But like we say, age is undefeated. So he's gonna slow down. I mean, we have two factors. We don't know what is, they say with Cuban boxers, you don't know what their real age is. So, he might be older than we think. But, he's been in a lot of fights. But what I can say is that his last two fights have been really exciting. The Hurd fight was a good fight, and this was a good fight. So, he might be, maybe he can get another shot at the title. I don't think he would hold it for very long. He is going to naturally slow down. So, but he is giving a lot better fights than he was before when he was headlining. And I'd still like to see him against, Charlo, because I think that would be an interesting fight. And it was a fight that, was supposed to be lined up a long time ago. I think if they run this back again, he should win again. I just don't think Castano's level is as good as the top guys in the division. And I know he's relatively young, and he's only had 16 fights, but I just don't really see him competing with the top guys.
Going to you, Daniel. The same questions I posed to Jacob. I want to ask you to respond to those questions as well. Your reaction, your breakdown of the fight. Do you agree with Jacob that Lara deserved the decision? And also, the last question is your response to what I was asking. Do you think at this stage of his career, we're starting to see some decline in one Erislandy Lara?
As far as the decision, I think it was fair. Like that, to me, that fight was a draw in a way, because while Castano was making this, he did dictate the pace. He did pretty much, for a good amount of the fight, dictate where Lara was going to go. But Lara, on the other hand, didn't do a lot of the lateral movement that he's known for. He didn't. He stayed to play a little bit of rope it up and stay stationary. And I think he himself tried to take a little bit of the page out of the Hurd fight, because some of the best success that he had against Hurd was inside, where Hurd wasn't able to use the range to punch as clearly or put as much emphasis on his counters. The problem, though, is, you can pretty much answer the second question with this, that Hurd fight took something out of Lara. Always when you have a really, really good fight, and Lara Hurd is like one of the fights of the year for last year, it always takes something out of you when you had a really, really good fight, particularly when you're at that age and you just run into somebody that you just weren't able to beat, like Lara was with Hurd, unfortunately. And yeah, we're starting to see probably a little bit of decline. Now, could it in turn cause Lara to become a more entertaining fighter by default? Yeah, you're starting to see that, because since he's not moving around as much, he's becoming more stationary. He'll sit down in his punches and he'll fight on the inside more. The problem, though, is he uses lateral movement so well to tire out his opponents in the past that since he wasn't able to this time, he was able to let Castano come in and really set his pace throughout the fight. Even though, as Jacob mentioned, like a lot of the head punches were landing on the gloves, but the body punches weren't. That's the truth. Like particularly the left, when he started to throw consecutive left hooks to the body. And after you had a fight like that against Jarrett Hurd, who hurt you to the body as well, it stops you for a bit. I agree with Jacob, and also when the Castano, because he's still young in his career, I don't think he is at that level where I could say put him with Hurd, put him with Charlo, Harrison, Munguia. But I wouldn't mind seeing this fight again. Because I want to see if Castano can actually adjust to what he did and probably be a little bit more aggressive, be a little bit more accurate. And I want to see if Lara tries to go back to the lateral movement a bit to try to get a clear victory, because like I mentioned, that the fight with Canelo is probably the most telling, where you can make a very, very solid argument that he won that fight. And it just those mean little adjustments against guys have cost him fights before, or whether it's been draws or losses. Maybe he can make an adjustment to make sure that he can actually win. He'll actually win this fight, but I wouldn't mind seeing it again.
I'm with you, Daniel. I thought the draw was fair. The fight was close and competitive. I think both of you guys predicted that Castano could possibly pull the upset, but he beats Castano in a rematch. Okay, what does that really prove is my question. I'm more in line with Jacob here. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Charlo. I think at this point, I don't know if he wants from a sheer physical standpoint, I don't know if he would want a rematch with Jarrett Hurd. He's just too big and too strong. And if you watch the little interviews with Lara, he kind of basically admitted as much. And when he said that it wasn't the power, it was just the physical size of Jarrett Hurd that was really hurting him. I don't think he wants to go through that again. He's not going to get that kind of physicality with Mel Charlo at 54. Castano, okay, I think he would beat him in a rematch. I would be more inclined to say fight the winner of Charlo Harrison rematch, but that's just me. I see what you need has joined us. We're talking about the draw between Erislandy Lara and Bryan Castano. Get you into the conversation, what you need, your thoughts on that fight, and I'm going to pose the question to you that I posed to both Jacob and Daniel. At age 35, a lot of discussion after the fight that signs of age are starting to creep in on one Erislandy Lara. Your thoughts on that?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Barely hear you. I can barely hear you.
Yeah, I can barely hear you. You may need to cut your mic up. Still can't hear you. Nah, still can't hear you right now. What I'm going to do is going to go on to talk about another fight, what you need, and then once you get your mic issues resolved, see if I can go back to you. Going to go on the undercard. Going to you, Daniel, first. Luis Ortiz fought Christian Hammer. Ortiz won, pounded Hammer to the body all night long, and had control throughout. But for me, Daniel, I'm watching this. Ortiz won. He pretty much had his way for the most part. But my thought was this was not a top 5 heavyweight when I was watching him fight. I was a little bit unnerved by the fact that Hammer was able to land so many right hands, particularly during the first half of the fight. Am I being too critical of Ortiz, or is this a case of Ortiz kind of fighting down to his competition, something he's been guilty of in the past?
It's mainly that. It's mainly that because he's been known to do that for a long time, and makes it particularly interesting in this fight is the position that he finds himself in. we'll talk about a little bit of news, that he's in the position where he still has a name, he still has a reputation, but he's not putting the best emphasis to use, and probably he's not really that motivated at this point if it's not a title fight. I would say that if this was a Luis Ortiz that faced Brian Jennings that showed up to the Barclays Center against Christian Hammer, Hammer will probably be knocked out. But instead, he saw an Ortiz that let his defense slide a little bit, which could pretty much tell you he doesn't really particularly respect Hammer's power. And then the second half of the fight, he started to distance himself with and started landing the lefts. But I figured he would try to make a statement in this fight, considering the situation that Deontay Wilder was in. To try to make your statement there, saying like, "No, you should rematch me." He did say he wanted a rematch with Wilder or a fight with Joshua. But that performance is not indicative of somebody that would probably say be ready for that fight at the moment. And it's sad to say, really, that we may have seen the best Ortiz had to offer in that Wilder fight. And like I said, if that onslaught in that 7th round would have just happened 30 seconds sooner, he would have at least been a champion. But I don't think he has it at this stage to do it unless then his next fight is Wilder or Joshua, because right now he's just going to keep doing that, finding out the competition, not really stressing it out. And as he's doing it, he's just getting older.
I see Gail has joined us. Gail from Communities Digital News. Going to get her into the discussion right now, talking. First, give her opinion on Luis Ortiz and his win over Christian Hammer. Then you can add in your thoughts on Lara's win over Castano. First, Gail, thoughts on Ortiz win. What I felt kind of lackadaisical on his part, and as well as Lara and Castano. If you heard what we were talking about earlier, your thoughts on the question I posed or I asked earlier about possible decline upon one Erislandy Lara.
Yeah, I was listening, and thank you all. Good to finally be here. Yeah, in some ways, I hope Ortiz was being lackadaisical, because let's look at the alternative. Let's say that was his best effort. That is in some serious decline, and that's very possible. We all kind of joke around about age and Cuban birth certificates and so forth, but it's clear that Ortiz, is probably closer to 40 than 30, and God knows how much more. And we all know that Father Time is undefeated. It's a cliche in boxing, but it's true. So does he only muster up a little extra to get him going when there is a high-class opponent or a title in front of him? I think maybe. And Hammer wasn't it. He gave it what effort he could, but that may be all Luis has to offer. If that's the case, he still makes an interesting opponent for big names, especially for the guys that just end up with no dance partners. And right now you do have that going on in the heavyweight division. If that wasn't the case, and these guys could all find good fights without him, I think they'd probably try, unless they needed a guy who was a little bit of an easy out. So let's just say I came away from the last fight not particularly impressed. He didn't lose, but that's about the best thing I can say about it. Now, as for Lara and Castano, I was joined many people who thought Castano pulled it out. I really did. I can live with the draw. We're going to have to live with the draw. That's what it got to. And perhaps Lara is in the same boat as Ortiz, not as far along in the calendar, but clearly he is got more of his career behind him than in front of him. And I'm not seeing improvement in skill. What I am seeing improvement with him, however, is in aggression and be willing to mix it up. Now, is that a factor of the other skills are declining? His technical skills aren't as sharp. His speed isn't as sharp as it used to be. And so he's got to engage. Well, it does benefit him with the fans, because now a Lara fight in the last few years is a fight that is surprisingly entertaining and worth watching. So it hasn't really hurt him because he's not getting, A-list top title fights. But I did think in this case, it was close, not a robbery either way, no matter how it would have gone. Perhaps a draw was just the safe play. But I really thought the fight was pretty dead even going into those final 2 rounds, and Centeno did by far win the last 2 rounds, no question. So depending on where your scorecard was after 10, you have two more rounds clearly for Centeno. That would have been enough for me to swing it in his favor, 115 to 113.
Sorry, I was on mute. Jacob, your thoughts on Ortiz and his win over Hammer? Am I being too critical? Was it just, as I asked Daniel earlier, was this a case of Ortiz fighting down in competition, or like Lara, could there be issues of age creeping up?
No, I don't think you're being too critical. I think you're very fair in your normal assessments of of these kind of situations. Kind of to jump on Gail's earlier point, on paper Ortiz won, but he didn't really win, in my opinion. He's had performances like against Jennings, and even the performance against Wilder was good. He was this close to being the new champion. But then he fights, I had the unfortunate I guess opportunity to see him fight Kaufman, which was also a very lackluster fight. Ortiz has skills, but it's just like he's afraid to pull the trigger or something like that. Like he can have a guy hurt and then he just like doesn't like capitalize on it. I mean,
to me, he seems to just fight at one speed now.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been doing this. So even like when he fought Tony Thompson or Malik Scott, like these are guys that you shouldn't be taking to a decision. Like when he fought what's that guy's name? I also saw this fight, Cojanu or whatever his name is. He landed a good 1-2 and knocked the guy out. But it's like when he's willing to throw his hands and like actually instead of like going around and like boxing, like I mean this guy's old. He doesn't need to be getting rounds in. He's got to strike while the iron's hot. But that train is slowly leaving the station. Like I don't see anybody clamoring to see him in a rematch or fight, when he has performances like this. So, either he's going to naturally talk himself out of the conversation because nobody's going to want to see him fight any of the top guys, or, end up retiring because he gets too old. I mean, let's remember, this is a guy that, when he was going to fight Wilder, his team didn't put his heart medication on there, so like, we don't know what his actual health, like, how healthy this guy is. And again, the age has always been a question, but, for somebody that calls himself King Kong, he doesn't fight like King Kong, and he has the skills to do it. But, this might be one of those cases where a boxer has the skills, but doesn't have the mentality to put those things together to become a true champion. And, his time is slowly running out. The sand in the hourglass is falling fast.
It's interesting. In prior years, he was thought to be too dangerous for the guys at the top to fight him. He couldn't get a title shot. His last couple of fights have been, pretty meh. Where does he go from here, given the heavyweight landscape? We know that Joshua was going to fight Big Baby in June. We'll talk about this in the news segment, but it looks like Deontay Wilder may fight Brazil next. Where does Luis Ortiz go?
I mean, he's got to get a top fight, and he's got to look spectacular. He's got to knock the guy out and start calling these guys out. His time is too short to be messing around with these lower level, not even top 10 heavyweights and carrying them for, a decision.
Yeah, TikTok. I agree. Well, I think his main option, if the top names, and we all know who they are, aren't available, suck it up and fight one of these young guns, one of these rising star type heavyweights, guys who've got power, who have talent, but haven't developed the finite skill set. So I'm talking the Joe Joyces, the Daniel Dubois, get a couple of these guys who are being looked at as rising stars.
What about Reeves?
Well, that's not a bad one either. I think we mentioned that. And, sort of that, Latin America bragging rights kind of fight between those two would be a lot of fun. If they position it that way, it would sell. And it's not a bad one. We do not need to see him fight Bryan Jennings again. And I hope he resists that temptation.
Andy Reeves.
Dad would, hell, I'd rather see him fight Chris Arreola, for God's sakes. I really would. I mean, before he does some of these other bad choices.
I'll never call you a bandwagoner ever.
No, I got my soft spot for Chris.
Yeah, she mentions him almost like every other show.
I love the guy. Oh my God. Well, we've been talking about heavyweight division so much. Our conversations keep devolving to, it's heavyweight musical chairs right now, and the music's running and people are finding their seats, and we're wondering what guys are going to be left out. And if Ortiz and his team don't figure it out fast, he's going to be the one left without a seat, and he cannot screw around. He messed up his trajectory with his various issues and his blood pressure meds and all the things that have derailed him along the way. And he really, if he's lucky, he's got one or two good marquee fights left in him, and he better book them soon, because if we get to the end of 2019 and he hasn't had another one of those kind of fights, take notice fights, he's done. He's done. He's done as a main event marquee name. He might be a gatekeeper, but that's it.
I'll go to you, Daniel. What direction do you see Luis Ortiz going, given that Joshua has a fight lined up? It looks like Wilder's going to have a fight lined up. Fury, you don't know where he's going to go exactly, but you're hearing he may fight Joseph Parker. So outside the big three, where can Ortiz land a significant fight?
Well, when you think about it, it would probably have to be leaving Heyman to do it in for the moment, because all of the players right now are positioning themselves either with Top Rank or DAZN at the moment. And that's where he needs to go to get a marquee fight.
Aaron, we'll talk about that in a bit.
Like I mentioned, I said ESPN, I said Top Rank or DAZN.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I didn't hear your first part.
Yeah. And that's the difficult part of it when it comes to judging what Ortiz is, because you don't know what he's actually want to do, because he wants to win the title, but we also know his story. He's largely fighting to make sure that his daughter gets the treatment that she needs. And unfortunately, the position he's in right now in the PBC, there's not actually a lot of marquee fighters that you would want to see him against. Like, would you want to see him against Charles Martin? Would you want to see him against Gerald Washington?
Nope.
That's the whole thing. And then when you look, when you look at the ESPN side, yeah, Fury's a player. we'll leave out other names that are going to again. And, well, of course, yeah, there's the Bryan Jennings, Henry Ruiz situation. And, of course, the zone you have. Oh, no. If you stay with ESPN Plus, yeah, you can do the Joe Joyce fight. You can do a Daniel Dubois fight. Or if you go to the zone, obviously you can get you can try to get Joshua. Or if you're currently fighting people that are European champions, and if you want an easy knockout, go after David Price. But the issue's going to be.
But do you think that David Price fight does anything for him? I mean, Price doesn't. He has a name in Europe, but he's not really what I would call a top contender.
It depends mainly on your audience. That's the thing about it. Like right now, Joshua's learning that lesson right now. That he's not as big with an American audience as he is in the UK audience. And if you fight somebody like Price, or maybe in the UK, you start getting that buzz, right? Okay, if Wilder's not fighting AJ, if Fury's not fighting AJ, he needs somebody to fight because you can't just throw Dillian White out there again because obviously Dillian White has made moves. And the two other young British heavyweights of note are with Frank Warren. And right now, considering the situation between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, that's a non-starter. So there's only so much, unfortunately, he can do. It just depends where he decides to line up, because his biggest mistake probably was leaving Golden Boy the way he did. Because for all the shenanigans, like we mentioned, like when he popped against, I think it was, who was it? I forgot, it's an African fighter where he initially won the WBA interim title.
Coyote.
Coyote, yeah,
Latif
there
Coyote.
you go,
Yeah.
Yep. When he popped into that, Golden Boy, for all intents and purposes, could have dropped him easily. Because they remember, it was still at the time where they still technically had Deontay Wilder in the books. They chose not to. They chose to stick it out with him. And now he's kind of like a boat with no sail at the moment. When it comes into that, or a ship without a compass. They don't have a direction where to go, and unfortunately, he might be relegated to being a gatekeeper, which would be serviceable, but then he would just be one of those guys that came so close to the title, and it just slipped away.
But you made a good comparison, though, about like he's fighting for his daughter. Another fighter that's fighting for his daughter was Wilder, and he shows like way more passion. I mean, I'm not a Wilder fan at all, and I think his skills are, average at best. But when he goes out there, he's like trying to finish the fight and knock the guy out, as opposed, and he fights for his daughter. He is that inspirational story. So it's like, what else do you need to like light that fire? Like he's not fighting lately like he wants to be the champion.
It's also probably understanding of he probably does in a way understand the position he put himself in, and how pretty much he was used in a way by Eddie Hearn to get some of his guys fights. But he understands the picture now. Like, one champion is with PBC. The guy that a good amount of people with merit believe that beat that champion is now with Top Rank ESPN. And the main champion is with the Zone.
And that champion with PBC, he's entertaining an offer at least to go to Top Rank. So let's just say Wilder ends up signing a deal with Top Rank since Wilder declared himself a quote unquote free agent Could Ortiz wait his time and try to get an eventual rematch with Wilder?
He doesn't have time. That's the thing. He does not have time. Like we'll talk about in the news, like what Wilder's next move. Like it's a move he has to make because Fury decided to sign a contract without actually reading it. But he doesn't have time. Like if, yeah,
Ortiz has to make the move now though because they're not doing the rematch with Fury, and Fury wants to have a couple more fights before that rematch. He has a window of opportunity that's this short. It's very short, but he's got to strike now. And I to say he got used, I'd rather be used than not used at all. I mean, in a boxing game, because if you're not fighting, you're not getting anything.
I see what you need has joined us. Unmute your mic. What you need and see if we can all hear you. Unmute your mic and just say something.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Quick word on not only this fight with Ortiz and Hammer, but also the fight we talked about to kick off the show, Erislandy, Lara, and Castano, the draw.
Well, good night to everybody. Good night to everybody. Yeah, first of all, Erislandy, Lara versus Bryan Castano. I thought that was a fantastic fight. I don't know if a lot of people knew about Castano. I did a little homework on him. Argentinian fighter, busy style, patting himself a little bit after Sugar Ray Leonard, even though he's a little bit, not as refined. He's on you like a tick, slips, and he has a mass of skills. He reminds me a bit of Adrian Granados, but with a lot more refinement, a lot more skill. And Adrian Granados should be facing Danny Garcia soon down the road. I'm looking forward to that fight. So Castano was not an easy customer. If you guys were listening to the interview with the vice president of Heyman Management a couple weeks back, he was talking about these two sleepers, Luis Ortiz versus Christian Hammer and Erislandy Lara versus Bryan Castano. Young, undefeated Argentinian fighter. The guys from Argentina, they're tough. And so he brought the fight to Erislandy Lara. He was not going to allow Lara to just sharpshoot him. And he would not allow Lara to be in the clinch. He would not allow Lara to get away in the clinch. I love that about these fighters. So if you look at the fight, really, Castano really brought the fight to Lara. Some people thought that Castano won the fight because he managed to land a number of body shots on Lara, especially in close. But Lara did his thing in there as well. Lara kept his composure, did his thing in there. And just especially coming off the Jarrett Hurd fight where another fighter sees Jarrett Hurd bring the pressure on Lara and crack him and drop him in the final round. Castano had all of that momentum going for him. So Lara did very well to stem that tide that was coming at him because most boxers don't bring that kind of energy. They don't bring that kind. Remember, this is a young fighter, up and coming, hungry, coming from another country, has nothing to lose, everything to gain, get a name on his roster. So yeah, Castano was bringing the heat. Lara was trying to do what he does and sort of kind of slow it. Ironically, he was trying to slow down the tempo. And then he ended up in a fight with Castano. It was more of a fight than anything else. But I thought that in spite of all of that, I think Lara did very well. The defense of Castano and Lara was quite high quality defense and stuff. So I enjoyed it. I want to see more Castano, to be honest with you. I want to see him. There's all these unknown fighters out there that get a chance, they get a break to be in the spotlight, to hang with some of these big dogs, and they really are performing. And especially in PBC, the underdogs are really performing. They're up for these fights. I don't know if it's because of the money that's offered to them or what, but the opportunity, these guys are prime and up. The other example was Christian Hammer. Watching that fight, I was so intrigued that Christian Hammer could land those lead rights on King Kong. Now, I know King Kong got hit with shots before. I remember when he had that fight with, what's his name? He was an undefeated fighter. He ended up stopping the fighter, but inside fighter from Philly. I don't know if you guys remember who I'm talking about. Bryan Jennings.
Yeah.
That was a great fight. Bryan Jennings was putting up a fantastic fight, landing shots on King Kong, but King Kong ended up catching him with an uppercut, got him out of there. So I've seen King Kong be outboxed before. This guy was systematic. I mean, if you guys were really paying attention, this was a chess match, and systematically, Christian Hammer was not going to go anywhere. King Kong tried, especially in the 12th round, he tried to crash him. Christian Hammer would come back with that lead right and tag him. And it's a science to throw in that lead right the way how he did it. And this guy, he figured it out. And I really loved it. This was as King Kong would say, it was a tougher fight than people understand or recognize. And I don't think a lot of people realize this. People will be looking at Christian Hammer saying, oh, he got stopped by Tyson Fury. And, in his very first fight in his career, he got stopped. You can't watch at that. Styles make fights, first of all. And second of all, most importantly, you will find that a fighter can be up for a certain challenge. The time when this guy met Tyson Fury, which was a while back, besides Tyson Fury being so tall and long and an excellent boxer at that too, he probably was a little less experienced. But now being at the top tier, this guy survived Povetkin, you know what I mean? His thing, this guy is kind of like Adrian Broner. His punch output is what lets him down. But if he could just hang a little bit more, land some more lead rights, and do his thing, he could actually have been very competitive and even probably won the fight, right? It's just that his punch output wasn't that high. But he wasn't backing down. You know what I'm saying? And he was landing some really good punches. Luis Ortiz realized he couldn't just come in straight on the guy, so he started circling him and boxing him. I love what Ortiz and they did, and even the precautions they took in the 12th round, and then they tried to crash him in the 12th round, get him out of there, but he was not going anywhere. I mean, when a fighter decides they're going to fight you and they're fighting to win and they're fighting to be in the game, it's kind of hard to get them out of there, because mentally that person, there's a certain point where you realize this person's not going anywhere. I'm not going to get him out of there, and that's because this guy wasn't afraid of King Kong Ortiz. The aura around King Kong Ortiz did not faze him at all. So he went in there to win. And the same thing with the young guy, Bryan Castano, next generation, coming to just wipe out Lara, take his legacy and roll with it. That's what was going on. So, I mean, when you meet a fighter hungry like that, they're coming for your spot unless you're up for it as well, especially if you've been at the top for so long. If you're not up for that challenge, anything could happen. You can just get knocked off of the pedestal just like that. We look at Manny Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn as a perfect example. Jeff Horn was hungry. He was coming for it. Pacquiao wasn't quite up to that challenge. And so Jeff Horn took it. And that's what happens when you're the king of the mountain. So, yeah, Luis Ortiz is a name out there. I thought he did well in that fight. He's far from finished. I know people wanted to see him KO the guy because he's King Kong and all of that, but I think he did the right thing. I think strategically, sometimes you have to box safe against these young, hungry lions, and you just do what you got to do. The only thing that lets down Bryan Castano, though, he doesn't really have that power. He throws a lot of combinations and stuff, but he doesn't really have, crushing power or anything like that. So I think if he had a little bit more pop and more power, he might have put Lara in a lot more difficulty, because if you think about it, Erislandy Lara doesn't do well against pressure fighters. He didn't do well against Canelo. He didn't do well against Angulo. Remember, he got dropped twice by Angulo. He didn't do well against the recently there. What's the guy's name?
Hurd.
He didn't do well against Hurd, right? You really bring the heat on Lara, and you can get him in all kinds of problems. So this fight again, he showed his mettle, and again he showed that he's a sharpshooter. He's not really a combinational fighter and stuff. And against a guy that had high energy, high activity, was roughing him up on the inside, he still proved that he can make it through that. So he didn't look super good, all right? He didn't look dominant. But against that kind of style, generally Lara actually has done, I would say if that kid had a little bit more pop in his hands, yeah, Lara might have gotten dropped once or twice in that fight, But he didn't really have that pop, so. But, yeah, that's the kind of fighter that Lara has problems with. If you look at it consistently through his career, he's had problems with that kind of fighter. If you look at the end of the fight between Paul Williams and Erislandy Lara, you'll see the same thing happen again. When Paul Williams really started bringing the heat on Lara, he didn't really have much of an answer. He was boxing well, but he didn't really have much of an answer. So you really bring the heat on Lara, you really bring the pressure on him, yeah. And that's the kind of fight you get. He's a dog, though. Lara's a dog. I'll tell you that. He got a dog in him. He's not just going to go down like that. So yeah, that's what I saw in that matchup. And then when I look at Luis King Kong Ortiz, that's the kind of thing. And if you look at the people from the Cuban school of boxing, generally speaking, unless they're inside fighters, that's the kind of fight they are. You bring the heat on Guillermo Rigondeaux, and he'll start to back off. He won't be coming at you. You bring the heat on all of those Cuban boxers, they'll start to box you. They'll box you more than they'll try and pressure fight you. That's just the way I would go.
One more fight on the ledger in terms of that card. I wasn't able to see all the fight. I got home late from work, so I missed the fight. And I've only been able to see parts of the fight. Eduardo Ramirez fighting Bryan the Gracia, I believe that's how he pronounces his last name. I'm just going to open it up for anybody who was able to view the fight. I heard it was a pretty exciting fight, bit of an upset. For anybody who saw the fight, please discuss it. Anyone?
Yeah, go ahead.
I missed it too.
Oh, I'll go then. Yeah, it was I thought it was a really good fight. It was a lot of action. I didn't know a ton about either guy. But Ramirez was catching him with some nice uppercuts, and I actually thought that I think they stopped the fight in like the 9th round or whatever, and I actually thought it could have gone on. I mean, Gracia was hurt maybe a little bit, but I mean he didn't get dropped, so on the scorecards it was pretty close. I believe it was like within, I think one had it a draw at that point, and a couple had it maybe 2-point difference. So I would have liked to see it go on a little bit longer. But or even if this is another fight that I think they could run it back, and they probably put up another exciting fight. But yeah, it was a really good fight. I mean, if anybody hasn't checked it out yet, I think it was worth it. With the Lara fight, it was a pretty good night of boxing.
One more fight to talk about before we go into the news and whatnot. We talked last week about heavyweight that Daniel mentioned by the name of Junior Fa. Fa fought in Ohio against a guy by the name of Outah. Won by first round knockout. Outah didn't offer any resistance for those who was able to see the fight. Your impressions about the brief activity that you saw in terms of Junior Fa, or if you were like pretty you didn't get anything from it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't really get anything from this fight. He dropped them 4 times, but I think they were, because it was WBO rules or something. I think something like that they let it go for that 4th knockdown. But he basically, the first punch that he landed, it was actually off of a break. I think the other guy thought the ref was gonna come and break him, and Fa punched him out of the break with I think it was a nice right hand, just right on the jaw, and dropped him, and he almost didn't make the count. But to me, there wasn't a lot to see in this fight. I mean, after that, the other guy was just basically, trying to hold or run, and it was done at that point. So we didn't get to see a lot of action.
Indeed.
Yeah, it was one of those things where Fa needed to just check a box off. He checked the box. As far as a spectacular introduction to fans, this wasn't going to be it, really. And his opponent, you're right, Jacob, absolutely right. After he got clocked, and mainly being caught by surprise, in addition to having a punch landed in just the right place, he should have just stayed down. Honest to God, he just should have decided, all right, I'm good. I'm going to get that paycheck. I'm done. But, I guess you have to give him some credit for getting up and carrying on. But, who's joking, or, who's kidding who? We know what he was there for. And Fa did what he needed to do. I'd like to see how they're going to bring him along. We have all these, young heavyweights sort of floating around, this next generation, who are all, have somewhere between 5 and 10 fights or so. And at some point, they got to start heading toward each other. And I think the bolder guys, the guys that really have a belief in themselves and really have the talent to get to the top, need to start cherry picking off some of these other guys, and maybe a Dubois or a Joe Joyce call a guy like Faw out. We'll see.
Interesting. Let's move on to some news here. A couple of shows back, we had a pretty extensive look at the heavyweight division, particularly the top of the heavyweight division. Talk Joshua, talk Wilder. A guy we mentioned within that discussion is one Dillian White, who is signed to Matchroom, ranked number 1 by the BO, I believe. Dillian White is a guy who really deserves a title shot. Has long earned a title shot, in my opinion, but he just has not been able to get it. He thought he was going to get one in a rematch with Anthony Joshua. He was number 1 contender basically all of last year. He thought he was trying to position himself to get a title opportunity against Deontay Wilder. Well, news has broke over the weekend that Dillian White is on the verge of leaving Matchroom on the verge of moving from Matchroom and is close to signing a deal with ESPN Top Rank. I'll go to you, Daniel, to talk about kind of the business side on this and then open the discussion to everyone else. Your thoughts on the news of Dillian White moving from Matchroom to Top Rank, a move that people who talk the sport, who talk the sweet science, has kind of been urging Dillian White to do for a while now, given this situation where he's been toiling along. Whatever you think about him as a fighter, at this point, it's pretty obvious to say that a title shot he has earned and deserves.
Oh yeah, he's earned it. I think almost all of his fights in the way since that loss to Joshua have been some type of title eliminator.
Yes, seemingly, yeah.
Yeah, and by all accounts, he should be the mandatory for WBC. But the WBC decided to be idiotic at one point. And we'll probably talk about that, like I said, next. But it's a move that needed to be made. Now, Dillian White's no stranger to Top Rank. He has fought in their cards before, under the radar. Really, really under the radar, to the point where people didn't even realize that Dillian White was in the card until he actually came out. So he's familiar with Top Rank in a way to how they do things. And I completely understand why he did it. When you fought as many fights as you have, when you have looked as good as you have been against the competition that has been put in front of you, and when you seemingly expected to be fighting next month against Anthony Joshua in Wembley Stadium, and then only to have Eddie Hearn instead have Joshua move to the U.S. to fight Big Baby Miller, in large part because of what Tyson Fury has done in the Wilder fight, I completely understand it. I completely understand it. Now, moving to Top Rank, it does provide Fury with one of the ways he can get that big money in that contract. Because you mentioned he's Dillian White's number 1 contender at WBC. I think he is number 2 or number 3 in the WBO. I mean, I think he may be number 1 now.
I'm hearing some background noise as you're talking, Dan. You don't know what it is?
I think somebody at TV.
Okay.
But
something's rubbing against something. I don't know. Almost like a wrench.
All right. Well, like I said, I think he's 2 or 3 in the BO. I think he's in the top 5 of the IBF. And WBA said it's its own goddamn landfill. But he's earned the spot that he's in, and now he can go to Top Rank. He can build his brand in the U.S. And not to mention, like I said, it gives Fury a contender that will get him that big contract money. But guess what? It also, like Gail mentioned, when it comes to the young guys, suddenly now dealing what's available for Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois. Because we have to remember, if you sign with Top Rank and you sign ESPN Plus, you also in turn have a working relationship with Frank Warren. So it does free up, it does give him a new level of opponents, and it makes the situation better. Like if you're not going to get an immediate title fight, get yourself a marquee name, and if you, let's say if you wind up beating Tyson Fury, that's a big mark. That's a huge mark considering how Fury looked against Wilder. And ultimately, it was the move to make. It was the move to make. Obviously, Eddie Hearn didn't want to pay him what he thought he wanted to get for the Joshua fight. I understand why, because if it's Wembley Stadium, it's a fight that's done before. You're not exactly going to, quote unquote, spend the big money on a fight you've seen before at a domestic level in the UK. But on all standpoints, it's a move he had to make. Whether if it was going to be with ESPN or it was going to be with the PBC, it had to be made because the kid's done enough to earn a title shot. I completely agree. The kid's done enough. So he might as well put himself in the position to finally get that title shot.
Let's bring everybody else into the discussion, get their reaction, starting with Gail. Thoughts on Dillian Whyte apparently decided to move from Matchroom to ESPN Top Rank. First, Gail, then you, what you need.
Hey, absolutely. For all the reasons Daniel's mentioned, I have very little to add to that. He spoke for me. This is the right move for Whyte. He has done more than enough to earn himself a title shot. But staying with Matchroom, he was always going to be the number 2 guy in the pecking order. And, number 2 behind Anthony Joshua. There's nothing he can do about that. It doesn't need to mean that there's any particular animosity or anger or bad feelings about his current promotional situation. It's simply the reality of who the priorities are and who the bigger money makers are. And it leaves him in a bad situation. So this is a good, healthy move. It opens up other possibilities in a very busy division. It gives him the potential for some great American TV exposure. I think the American fans, the casual fans who don't see a whole lot of the boxing world beyond the heavyweight division, they'll watch a heavyweight that they don't necessarily know in a different way that they might not watch a flyweight that they don't know. They see a big guy in heavyweights. That's enough name brand for them. And I think the American audience will really like Dillian Whyte. So very smart. Let's face it, Top Rank and ESPN is kind of the, freshest faces, fresher seeming than PBC. And you're on a roll. So smart move. I would have advised him had he asked me, not that he did, but to do exactly this.
What you need, and then Jacob, your reaction to Dillian Whyte moving from Top Rank, Matchroom to Top Rank. Seems like a good move on both parties.
Yeah, I mean he's shooting for Tyson Fury. Obviously, he couldn't get Anthony Joshua. He couldn't get Deontay Wilder, so he's shooting for Tyson Fury. So that's I think the goal. I think that was the incentive he was moving for, because he realized it didn't work out with Anthony Joshua. Somehow his negotiations went south, and he was supposed to fight Anthony Joshua. It didn't work out. Baby Miller's got that one. Deontay Wilder, it doesn't look like he's going to be facing him. It seems as though it's Dominic Breazeale. They were really trying to get the Tyson Fury rematch. I don't know what happened between Wilder and him, because he was, as they said, the #1 contender for that spot, the WBC spot. I don't know. They had to have probably contacted him, whatever the agreements were. He didn't like it. So he's shooting towards Tyson Fury. That's a good matchup, Dillian Whyte versus Tyson Fury. Interestingly enough, I thought this would have happened in the UK, but now we're going to actually see it on American television, which will be broadcast in the UK, but most likely the fight will be in America. So that's an interesting thing, interesting play right there. The other thing that I don't know if you guys discussed it, but King Kong Ortiz, I heard Luis King Kong Ortiz say that he's looking at also his eyes are trained on Tyson Fury. So that's also very interesting. If Ortiz were to face Fury or Whyte were to face Fury, I don't know which one. Tyson Fury looks like he has options. And Ortiz, as we all know, is kind of like a free agent when it comes to promotion. So because he's managed by Al Heyman, he can go anywhere. So that's kind of interesting. And it kind of opens the door. I'm not too sure. Is Joseph Parker a top ranked fighter?
I don't.
He's co-promoted by Top Rank.
Oh yeah. Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
I think.
Interesting. You know what?
Well, no, wait.
Joseph Parker has been trying to get a rematch with Dillian Whyte. So I don't know if Dillian Whyte wants to rematch, but Joseph Parker definitely wants it. So it might be a trade-off. If he gets the Tyson Fury fight or whatever, then Joseph Parker might get his little stake in getting a rematch with Dillian Whyte. Because I know Parker's engaged with somebody else. I think he has some other fight.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. Early word has been that now that Fury has decided to not have a rematch with Deontay Wilder, the first option, possibly this summer, is a fight with Joseph Parker.
So. Oh, hell no. That's a terrible fight. That will not be a good fight. It's better he fights Dillian Whyte than he fights Joseph Parker. We've seen his brother, Hughie Fury, face Joseph Parker. That stunk up the joint. So I would suggest very strongly he fights somebody else.
Your thoughts, Jacob?
You know, Dillian Whyte, he first of all, he's built up quite a bit of a resume. I mean, he's fought, pretty much everybody at this point. So, besides Wilder and Fury, as far as the top guys, he's got to do whatever's best for him. Again, this is prize fighting. So, he was, given the opportunity. I know that they lowballed him in the fight for the rematch for the Joshua fight, and I think that's why he that's why he's not fighting Joshua, because he obviously thinks he's worth more, and he may be right, but in my opinion, sometimes you need to sacrifice, maybe getting the short end of the money. If you believe in yourself, get the win, and then now you're the man, and you can dictate, better terms, for future fights, because you would be the man at that point. And let's not forget, it's not like he didn't have a chance to, he fought Joshua early on, and Joshua's rise to, becoming the champion is today. So, but he lost. He straight up lost. He got knocked out, and and he's done enough to get that rematch. But again, when you're playing with someone like Joshua and Hearn, who are going to leverage their advantages as much as possible, be it money and the draw and all that stuff, you sometimes, if you want to build that legacy and get that second opportunity, sometimes you got to maybe, take that little bit of risk by getting a short end of the money to do that. But, he can get a fight with Fury. He could potentially get a fight with Wilder, because if, Wilder is not tied to a TV company, and if he does end up somehow signing with ESPN Top Rank, in the way that Fury did with the whole Warren thing, he can, that's another fight he can potentially get.
But do you think Dillian Whyte would want anything to do with Wilder, especially after what Wilder did to Tyson Fury?
Yeah, I don't think White's scared of Wilder.
Joseph Parker almost killed him in the 12th round. Remember that?
Well, I mean, Dillian Whyte has had tough fights with. So he lost to Joseph Parker. He's had tough fights with Chisora. he arguably lost that first fight, and even in the second fight, even though he ended in knockout, he was getting tagged. He had the tough fight with Parker, but I really do believe that White is a fighter. I think he'll fight anybody. I don't think he's scared of anybody. I think the main thing though is that what kind of money is he going to get? Because this is his job, so he wants to get paid what he thinks he's worth. And that happens with a lot of different boxers. But
and White feels that. Let's be honest here. From a technical standpoint, Deontay Wilder is flawed. He can be hit, and I think he can be buzzed.
I agree with you that he can be hit, but he can also hit. That's the problem.
But that's what it is. You take that chance. Anybody he fights, you know that going in. The question is, what do you think you can do against him? You know automatically what Deontay Wilder. You step in there, you have a chance of getting hurt. You have a chance of getting knocked out because of his extraordinary power, particularly with the right hand. But
he has consistently landed in every single fight.
But again, you know that going in. But you also know, given how Fury was able to land shots in there with him, given how Ortiz was able to land shots in there, I wouldn't think that Dillian Whyte wouldn't be. I mean, he would be worried, but he could also see opportunities where he could land against a Deontay Wilder. And you got to remember, Dillian Whyte is a big, strong guy, young guy, or younger than Ortiz. Maybe slew-footed all you want, but he could see. I could see. He probably looks at. I could use my size in there. I could use my weight in there to get to him with shots. If he gets hit, okay, it is what it is. But I will put that risk up if I can land some shots of my own against Wilder, who's kind of vulnerable himself.
And Fury got hit, and he rose from the dead.
Yeah,
I mean, that 12th round is so iconic, and you have to think. So Wilder's been able to have that equalizer for this long, but in that fight, he didn't really land, because that wasn't a right hand that he landed to put Fury down. So all these guys are probably thinking. All these guys are thinking. I need to land up. I can land up on him.
And it's also a mental thing. Wilder, when Fury got up, Wilder was on the receiving end. He was backing up at the end of that fight. Wilder's always had this mentality that he hits a guy, they go, and they don't get up. What for once if he faces a guy, particularly a guy who's strong like Dillian Whyte, he hits him, he goes down, he gets up, and he really comes at him with shots. Hard shots, and Dillian Whyte can punch.
Nah, not really, but
well, here's the thing. You also have to look at it when it comes to Dillian Whyte. We have to remember they've always had Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua have always had this little proxy war from the amateurs, and granted, you could think it ended when Joshua knocked him out in the 7th round. But one of the things that always stands out from that fight was how Joshua looked after the 2nd round, after the body attack of Whyte. He could do that in the way with Wilder.
And Wilder needs to stop coming in at 209 pounds. That's way too light.
Yeah, and now the main thing, though, is also, if you're going to go into this proxy war, one of the things that Anthony Joshua is accused of, more like Eddie Hearn's been more accused of, because I think if it's up to Joshua himself, he would probably do it, is you don't want to face Wilder because you're afraid of being knocked out, and you're afraid to fight Fury because as well-rounded as you are in offense, he'll run laps around you in defense.
True.
Why not? This move could easily go and then poke the bear with Joshua if he's able to get the Fury fight and say, hey, look, AJ, I'm fighting, and if imagine Dillian White fights Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder consecutively. He can easily then go to back to the UK, and then go Joshua say, I fought the two guys that your boss, Eddie Hearn, thinks you can't beat. And it just goes into that little mini war that they've had since the amateurs.
Interesting.
I'm just saying risk versus reward. Tyson Fury's arguably the best heavyweight boxer of all the heavyweights, and Wilder caught him, man. Wilder caught him, and if anybody's thinking, I'm not going to go at Wilder first, I'm going to go at Fury first. I know at least I won't get knocked the spark out, you know. That's all I'm saying.
Let's get Gail into this, because there's been a bunch of us dudes talking, and I don't want to leave. It would be unfair to leave the only woman here in this discussion out. So final word on this, Gail.
Well, I had my say. I'm certainly not shy about expressing myself. No, White deserves a good fight. As we said back at the beginning of this discussion, way back, maybe some of you don't remember when this actual discussion has started. Going to Top Rank is really smart for him, and he's got plenty of choices before he's got to make the call to fight a top name. You know, Fury isn't going to fight him right now. He wants a tune-up fight so he can look good in front of an American audience. But I think a Fury-White fight is a great fight for Top Rank. I think that's a very competitive fight. I'm as we say on the show, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. And where White manages to go from there, he's one of those guys who a lot of opponents are going to duck because he is dangerous. And I get it, you know, at the elite level of this division, as we saw with Wilder and Fury, you know, guys have to take a risk. Yeah, a lot of them have power, but a lot of them, you know, are going to have to risk getting hit themselves on the way in. That's what makes it fun to watch. The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Want to give a shout out to Awakened Masters on the live YouTube chat. A couple of comments he had in our discussion about King Kong Ortiz. He says King Kong is way older than he claims. Yeah, there's a wide suspicion of that he's supposedly going on 40, but a lot of people believe he's much older than 40. And Awakened Masters says he would like to see King Kong Ortiz fight Andy Ruiz next. That's a good fight. That's a good fight. I wouldn't be upset at that. Ruiz hadn't heard much from him since his loss to Joseph Parker. Yeah, that's a good matchup. That's a good matchup all around. I'm going to give anybody here who wants to talk about any other news happening in boxing the opportunity to do so before we start previewing fights. So the floor is yours for anybody who wants to bring any more news developments that's been happening.
No, I think the only thing major is that Wilder, that the WBC has ordered, and it looks like it's probably going to wind up happening, Wilder versus Brazil. Like I said, it's Wilder might as well just take care of it now. Like, just undo the mistake that the WBC did when they made Brazil the mandatory.
Gail, Jacob, what you need? Any other news developments you want to talk about right quick?
I think we are in good shape. Let's get the previews on.
Okay, alrighty then. Going to the UK Friday, ESPN Plus, I believe it is, London. Two prominent prospects / contenders, Anthony Yarde fighting Travis Reeves in a 10-round light heavyweight bout. Daniel Dubois fighting a guy by the name of Cojanu in a 10-round heavyweight contest. I'll go to you what you need. I don't know if you had much of an opportunity to talk about Anthony Yarde. I'm going to give you the floor now to talk about Yarde. And if you want to talk about Dubois as well, since his name has been mentioned on the show this evening, talk about those fights right quick. If you don't know much about the opponents, just talk about the fighters, Anthony Yarde and Daniel Dubois, and your thoughts on them.
I don't know much about Anthony Yarde or Daniel Dubois, to be honest with you. I've not really been following them. I know about Anthony Yarde. Is he the no, he's not the 140 pounder, right?
Yarde is the light heavyweight. I think he's ranked #1 by the BO. I don't think he deserves that shot. Personally, I believe there's another UK light heavyweight that's a better overall prospect, but he's the one who gets but Yarde is the one who gets the most attention.
Okay. No, I don't know much about him or Dubois. I'll have to research them.
Okay. Anybody else who want to talk about either Yarde or Dubois? The floor is yours.
It's time to show out, particularly with Dubois, because he's in the same trajectory right now as Joe Joyce is, where it's going to be slow, steady, but sooner or later you're going to have to put yourself in the contender spot if you are actually of it. So Cojanu's, like I said, he's your fight. Or we mentioned him before. He's the guy that got knocked out by Luis Ortiz pretty viciously, but it's something that he needs to do to step up. And for Anthony Yarde, yeah, I don't think he deserves it. I don't think he deserves a WBO ranking, but there's a reason why in the UK the WBO is called the Warren Boxing Organization. So, in a way, he has to really shell out, because right now Kovalev's the champ. And Kovalev has been boxing pretty well, and looks like he has found the rhythm. You might as well tackle him. Yeah, with McCurk. You might as well tackle him now. Try to fight right now before he really gets comfortable with McCurk. Because, like I've always said, I think to me it always takes 2 to 3 fights for a fighter and a trainer to fully gel. It takes 2 to 3 training camps. You might as well try to tackle him now, when it's going to be in the second, and especially now since that crucial aura of that knockout is gone. And you have to do it before, and we have to mention before main events can start calling about doing a trilogy with Alvarez, because a trilogy would be warranted in that fight, because it was a tale of two different fights. You might as well do it now. Meanwhile, not get overshadowed by the matchroom light heavyweight that I agree with Mike that is a much better overall prospect.
And for those who don't know who I'm talking about in terms of the light heavyweight prospect, who I think is the light heavyweight who I think is the better prospect. For me, I think Joshua Buatsi, also a British light heavyweight. I just think he's an overall better fighter. They're both come along at the same time. But again, Yarde is getting the more shine, getting the more attention. Dubois, Daniel, the thing I will say is, in kind of a pushback, I'm willing to give Dubois some more time, because he's only 21 years old. He's still young and raw. So he needs some room to develop and to grow and to mature. So he can wait. He can wait in the queue for a couple of years, actually, until he really learns what he's doing in there. But Yarde, it is what it is with him. They got him that #1 ranking. He's going to sit on it as long as possible till he gets a Kovalev bout. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes throughout all of 2019 and not even fight Kovalev. They got it just because of the ranking itself. They're going to sit on that. Let's move on to another fight here. The fights we just talked about with Yarde and Dubois is happening Friday in London. Going to talk about a fight that's going to happen Saturday, I believe, on PBC. I can't remember the exact location right now. But Shawn Porter, coming off of his win over Danny Garcia to win the vacant BC title, making the first defense of that title on PBC. Again, I can't remember exact location.
Carson.
Carson, thank you.
Dignity Sports
Carson,
Health Park.
and you pick
StubHub,
whatever name
StubHub,
of that place.
StubHub, StubHub. I'm forever calling it the
DS,
StubHub.
was it the Dignity
Dignity Sports Health
DHSP?
Park.
DHSP, you can
I don't
call it.
care.
You
I'm still
said you the
calling it.
random person. Where's the Dignity Health Sports Park? They look at you and say, "Oh, what?" Nah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be StubHub forever.
I'm calling it the StubHub. I'm going to you, Gail and Jacob, since that's relative in your area. Your thoughts on Shawn Porter? He's fighting his mandatory contender, I believe, and Ugas. Start the discussion off with you first, Gail, and then Jacob. I should say Jacob, and then what you need if you have some commentary on it, please do.
Well, Jacob needs to jump in with me here. You know, we were discussing, hey, Jacob, you going up to StubHub to see that fight? And he's, you know, and then he asked me the same question. We both sort of went, nah, nah. It's still a very good possibility, even though it is officially March in Southern California, that it's going to be another cold night, and it could be a rainy night for those guys. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of crowd it draws. And, you know, StubHub has not always been Shawn Porter's best venue. That's where he got beaten by Kell Brook. Yep, in a shocker, in an absolute shocker to the folks who were there. So it's interesting to me that he's actually choosing to fight there. You know, if a fighter's superstitious in any way, you know, you don't willingly go back. But I will say that Shawn Porter is a good soldier. You know, he's easy for these promoters to work with. That's why he gets a lot of fights. He puts on a good show. He should win. You know, he's very, very interested in seizing the day because, you know, he's seeing a diminished Keith Thurman based on Thurman's last fight. And, you know, very few other folks out there willing to seize the division, except maybe for Crawford. And he'd like to get in there before Crawford gets up to the top, or at least figure that he'll go down swinging against Crawford. I mean, who knows? If promotional issues could be a bit of a problem there. But the welterweight division is definitely in flux. And so he'll want to get out there, put on a wild show. I have a feeling this might be a real messy center of the ring fight. We'll see. But it is competing with a pretty good card, which I'm sure we'll talk about after this. That's probably its biggest problem is, you know, for fighters, for fans who have their attention split between, you know, these two different marquee events. I think Porter's fight might be the one you watch afterward, you know, recorded.
Your thoughts, Jacob?
So as far as the superstition goes, he's only fought there one time, and it was a loss. But it's not the StubHub anymore, so it's a new slate. It's a new slate.
I don't think so. You walk in there and you know what it feels like. I don't give a damn what the name is.
I could call it the Home Depot Center because that's the original name.
Well, you know, and it's funny. Nobody ever remembers that. StubHub's stuck. It just seemed to where everybody, locals do. But if it was me, well, you know, here we are looking at a picture of you standing next to Showtime Shawn. So it's pretty funny. I mean, I think he'll do fine, but I think he might get a little roughed up, you know, depending on how much he decides he wants to engage and put on a show.
Another thing to note is that the last time they had a fight here when Davis fought, was his name Ruiz? Was it Ruiz? But there were so many fights on the card. If you're looking, I'm looking at box rec at the card. There's 14 fights on here, potentially even more. So it's another, you know, bunch of fights on a card. So they'll hopefully, you know, for the fans that end up going out there. I'm not going to make it out for this one because I'm saving up for a couple fights here in April that, you know, have a little bit more intrigue for me. But I agree with you, Gail, in the sense that so Porter's, you know, I like Porter. I think he works hard, and you know he has his skills are a little, you know, little on the rough edge. You know, he's a rough fighter. He's kind of like a little linebacker, you know, in there. So this could be a sneaky, like kind of ugly, rough and tumble fight. But I think
so.
I think he will still walk away with the victory and still keep his title. But it could be a lot of like holding and a lot of inside fighting. Maybe kind of similar to when he fought Berto. Maybe some headbutts and hopefully not a cut or anything like that. But yeah, and again, there's a chance that it could rain. It's been raining here in Southern California, pretty hard for the last few weeks here. So
yeah, we're weather punks. I mean, we just are. I admit it. I own it. I don't want to sit out in the cold. I don't want to sit in the rain. I don't give a damn. I mean, it would be very few fights I'd want to do that for. So I think
last time I was there, you're making fun of me because I was in shorts.
I know, it's just crazy stuff. But yeah, lately these cards have been sort of never ending. You have 14 fights and maybe one of them falls off because guys don't make weight, but they're certainly making the best of getting their youngsters and their journeymen in the ring and getting rounds in. So
Guerrero's on. Well, Robert Guerrero's back on this card.
Oh God!
Payano, Juan Carlos Payano is making his
shit.
return.
I mean, God.
What's his name? Payano, who lost against Inoue in that knockout. He's on the card. And then you got Cuellar is potentially on the card. So, they got a lot of those guys have been around for a while. They can't quit. And then you got some up and comers that are getting their debut fights and stuff.
I'm hearing some background, Gail. So first, mute your mic, please. Going to you what you need. In discussing both Lara and Ortiz, you mentioned how kind of a bad pattern among Cuban fighters where if you are physical with them and you come forward, they tend to box and not stand there and fight with you. Given the rough physical style of Shawn Porter against the Cuban Ugas, could you see that same scenario possibly happening in this fight coming up Saturday?
Most definitely. That is a possibility. But Ugas is a good fighter, though. He's a good fighter. And I watched some of his fights. Again, he's not really a guy who's a knockout artist like that, but he's a good boxer. So as Porter can't take anything for granted. It's still somebody who's hungry. He's trying to come for his title. And again, when somebody's motivated, you better be hungry yourself and motivated to stay on the top, because it's one thing to get to the top. It's not the same thing to stay at the top. And Porter would know that better than anybody else when he faced Kell Brook. So yeah, he better bring his A game.
There is one other fighter worth mentioning on this card, and actually, it goes very much in the theme of the discussion we've been having at length tonight about the rising stars and current stars of the heavyweight division. You have Efe Ajagba on this card facing Amir Mansour, which is an interesting fight for this guy. Ajagba is a Nigerian, tall, he's in the mold of the current guys who are super tall and lanky. He's 6'5". He supposedly has an 88-inch reach, just cracks me up. If his name's not familiar, a lot of people will remember him because he's the guy that Chris Harper walked out on after the opening bell a year or two ago. And he just stood there looking at himself saying, say what? Huh? What the hell? Yeah, he's a fearsome puncher. He is somewhat in the Wilder mold, but he's got a lot more finesse to him. So it's been very interesting to watch him. He is a resident of Texas, so he's fighting a lot in the United States. Very interesting guy.
Your thoughts on Porter's fight with Ugas Daniel?
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting fight to me because, like I said, Ugas have a similar style like in the Cuban school in a sense. So they're gonna make it rough on you. They're gonna box you and try to get inside. And going inside and going full bore is pretty much a trademark of Shawn Porter's game. So it's going to be rough for Tommy. You're going to see headbutts. The thing is, though, Ugas doesn't have the power to probably really bother Porter a little bit. He, in the way that Brooke bothered him a bit when they fought. So it'll be a tough fight. Like I said, I do expect the clinches. I do expect possibly a cut from a headbutt, but I do expect Porter to win. And you mentioned the division, Garo. Like, okay, you're looking at Danny Garcia, you're looking at Spence dealing with Mikey, Crawford's on the other side of the fence, so he's not available. You know what? Why not? If Thurman's not going to do it, why not complete that sparring tale since he's now in the PBC? Porter versus Manny.
Oh. Would they put Manny in there against someone that's rugged? Given how he looked against Horn.
Yeah, if Manny's calling out Errol Spence, why not Porter?
I don't think they do it. I think the Thurman fight is a bigger possibility than a Porter fight.
Yeah, I agree.
It's still a world champion. Manny's not going to. I don't think you differentiate between world champions. If he's looking at Errol Spence to fight, I mean, why not Porter?
Yeah, that's talk. I don't think he really wants Errol Spence. That's just talk.
You think so?
Yeah, I think that's just talk.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Thurman makes more sense. A lot more sense. I'm not. No offense, but I'm not buying it. I'm not buying this talk about Manny once. No.
I even heard Porter talking about having a fight with Errol Spence.
Yeah, he did talk that until they went down to the negotiating table, and you see what direction he turned. Because immediately after after he won, he talked about the same Shawn Porter talking about this is going to be the easiest negotiation ever. The fight still hasn't happened.
Right.
So, what does that tell you?
I don't know. He had a mandatory to get out of the way, so I guess he's trying to get the mandatory out of the way. But he's talking about Errol Spence still, which is interesting. We'll
see. Let's see how Spence how the fight comes off against Mikey. People have a habit of talking up a fight with Errol Spence, and it doesn't happen. Or they, only person who I believe really wants a fight with Errol Spence is Bud.
Well, Mikey too.
I mean, outside of that, I'm talking about welterweights.
Mikey's about to beat that
fight with Errol Spence.
I'm talking about welterweights who have been welterweights. Mikey's a different scenario. He's moving up. I'm talking about welterweights who's been around.
When Garcia beats Spence, everybody's gonna want a piece of him.
We'll talk about that.
That's the problem. That's the problem. You see, you can't. You have to wait till the guys are finished fighting, and then you can really say, okay, I want this guy, I want that. But you can't really. Boxing's weird, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's very, very, very true. Let's move on to Porter Ugas is happening on the 9th. The same night on the DAZN card in Verona, New York. You have Dmitry Bivol going to Yu-Gi-Oh! Bivol making his debut with DAZN. He's fighting Joe Smith Jr. I'm looking at this. If he doesn't get caught with anything big, Bivol should just box circles around Joe Smith. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he absolutely should. I don't think the question is whether Bivol is going to win the fight. The question is, what kind of win is it going to be? First of all, Joe Smith Jr., he is one of these spectacular one-punch win guys. But he's been out of the ring quite a long time. And, he hasn't had a tune-up fight. He's been very, very absent. And this is just not the best scenario for him to come back in. But he is one of those one-punch guys. So you get in close to him and you mix it up, he's coming at you, and you cannot make a mistake because he hits hard. You know, you dig trenches all day, you are going to be a strong dude. And his accuracy isn't bad either, but he has been out of the ring a long time. How slowed down is he going to be? Let's see. But he will come forward, and that's exactly the kind of guy I'd be. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw sort of a rough version replay of the fight that Bivol had Sullivan Barrera if they both get into the deeper water of the later rounds. We'll see. Bivol also he won his last fight, but he got roughed up a little bit against Pascal. So, he's feeling, I think, a little defensive. He was, the heir apparent to the top of the heavyweight division. Everyone was super excited about him. Go, to the in a little bit of a rough fashion along the way. So I think he may have that psychology of, I also have something to prove in the United States. He's very ambitious. So be interesting to see, what sort of fight he decides to have. Because you're absolutely right, Michael. The boss, be an easy win. He's got all the technical finesse in the world. His footwork is just spectacular. He just doesn't always need to put it in play if he hits a guy hard enough. So we'll see what happens. It'll be a very interesting fight to watch. And maybe it goes to the final bell again. Maybe it doesn't go very far at all.
Going to you, what you need. You've spoken very highly of Dmitry Bivol in the past here on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Quickly, your thoughts on his upcoming defense against Joe Smith Jr.
This is an outlandish prediction, but I think Bivol stops Joe Smith Jr.
It's not outlandish. I can see it.
Yeah, Bivol's not a one-punch combination guy. Not a one-punch guy, but he can put them punches together, and he has good defense. So I do see Joe Smith Jr. getting knocked out. Stop. He'll break him down, stop him. And the thing about it is, Joe Smith Jr., he don't really have one-punch knockout power. What happened was with Sullivan Barrera, he caught him with a left hook as Barrera was, I think, hooking as well. So, but Barrera's guard was down, so he got hooked on the top of the head, and that basically knocked him down. But I don't think he's a one-punch knockout artist, actually. I think Joe Smith Jr. put his punches together against Bernard Hopkins, broke him down, and knocked him out the ring. And I think Joe Smith Jr. has a lot of, he was a contender for the title, right? So he got himself in position again to be a contender for the title, but I don't think he's ready for a guy like Bivol at all. Bivol's on a whole other level. And what people don't understand was when Bivol faced Pascal is a two-time world champion. And Pascal also, he's very sly. He's very tricky. Pascal was trying to set traps for Bivol to walk in, and Bivol just wasn't having it. He was like, I'm not walking into that trap, right? So that's why the fight with Pascal kind of looked the way it did. But Dmitry Bivol, he's a smart fighter. He's a smart boxer. I just don't see him getting caught by Joe Smith Jr. I think this is one in which Bivol is going to look sensational in this fight for sure.
Jacob and Daniel, your thoughts?
I'm going to go against the team here. I actually think that Joe Smith could pull this out. I think he's a strong guy. Points made earlier by Gael. He has his normal job, digging ditches and doing manual labor. So he has a kind of grit to him that helps in the sport. I know he's been out of the ring for a while. And Bivol, he's good. I just don't think he's that. I don't think he's great. He has skills. Sometimes he seems to not put everything together. And again, you beat Pascal, but that's a faded Pascal. He's not the Pascal from back in the days, when he was, a top contender. So I'm not going to put as much into that win as most people would, but I'm gonna call an upset here. I'm gonna say Smith split decision.
Wow. Upsetting the apple cart here. Your thoughts, Daniel?
I'm joining you there, Jacob. Because
okay,
of
it's
a
two in a
couple of
row. Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
it's not a
it's
lonely
because of a
island
cou-
anymore.
Yeah, it's because of a couple of things. Like I said, watching Bivol live against Chilemba, it tells me a couple of things. The main thing is, if he doesn't feel like he can knock him out very, very fast, Bivol does take his foot off the gas pedal and then just settles for the decision making. You can do that with a guy like Isaac Chilemba, who doesn't have a lot of power. You can't do that against a kid like Joe Smith, who pretty much his claim is his power. And Smith, like I said, he's been doing the slow and steady road and building himself back up, and he's done it fairly well. Like we mentioned it when we talked about the first fight with Kovalev and Alvarez. That card would have been already Joe Smith versus Bivol, but their management decided to ease in, and get him a good victory out of it. The second reason I think this is probably going to be an upset is Bivol's already making statements already about going down to super middleweight. And if your mind's already thinking about another division, you may not already be thinking clearly about the one you're on. And granted, there's merit when it comes to Bivol being a super middleweight. He is a small light heavyweight. So it makes sense for him to go down to super middleweight in a way, but you're already thinking that. And like I said, when I interviewed Smith, when I interviewed his team, they know that they don't have a lot of opportunities to get the shot. So they're gonna try to go all out, and people can outbox him. Like I said, he can outbox fair and wide, but he can't put in the performances against a Pascal who was athletic as such, and he was just hoping you get caught in their area. But it's another Pascal over Chilemba with the guy that you could just outbox, but you weren't really afraid of the power. If Joe Smith winds up catching you, just because of the power that he has, he might buzz you. And like I said, all this talk about you going to super middleweight, your mind may not be in the game. And that's not something you can do.
So in other words, you're thinking that he's distracted coming into this fight. He has his mind set on other places, and because of that, he's not going to give Smith the full attention he warrants. And because Smith can punch, he can catch Bivol with something and take him out of there. And Smith is going to be fighting desperate.
And that way, yeah. And not to mention that this fight's not going to be in Atlantic City. Remember, this fight's going to be in upstate New York. And I said it's not that far. It's not that far from Shirley and Long Island. Like, I could drive there. I just can't at the moment. Can't go there at the moment because if you guys talked about weather in New York, downstate we've avoided good amount of the snow. Upstate hasn't.
Okay. On the undercard of this fight between Bivol and Joe Smith, Maurice Hooker, who fought one of the fights of the year, upset win for many over Alex Salcedo in Salcedo's hometown of Oklahoma City, making the second defense of the WBO super lightweight title against Haitian fighter, I believe, by the name of LesPierre. Could be wrong in country. If I am, my apologies. I go to you what you need quickly on this one. LesPierre is undefeated what you need, but in watching him, and more importantly, looking at the list of guys he's fought, I don't see anyone of note. Uh, I was surprised / impressed by what I saw from Hooker. He withstood the storm from Saucedo, and that right hand that he displayed against Saucedo. I'm afraid if he can get that off against a LesPierre, we could see the same result of a stoppage here. Your thoughts?
I am so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed because Daniel was telling me that LesPierre's from Trinidad. I just realized.
I'm sorry. I could be wrong. Like I said, I could be wrong on origin of country. Let me look it up right quick. Proceed.
He is born in Trinidad. Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry. You're right. He's born in Trinidad.
He resides in Brooklyn.
Yeah, but he lives in Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, which is I'm embarrassed because I don't even know him.
Wow.
But,
well, just because a guy is is a native, I mean, for all we know, he could have lived in New York, the large majority of his life, and which is probably the case.
Right. I know nothing about this dude, so that's scary. It's not really scary, but I just don't know anything about him. So Maurice Hooker is going to be fighting somebody. I'm sure he doesn't know much about the guy either.
And plus, I'm concerned he's 34 years old. Pretty late getting this kind of opportunity in your career.
Well, he does only have 22 fights. So it's not like he has all that banging up or whatever that might have happened to him, damage. So maybe at the age of 34. And when did he begin?
I want to say he began in 2012, I think. 12, right. 13, something like that.
Yep, 2012. And it looks like the majority of his fights have actually been either in the Dominican or in the boroughs, in
Brooklyn,
little spots. Queens, the infamous Aviator Sports Complex, probably the biggest venue he's been in before this one was the Prudential Center in Newark.
Okay, so this guy's like pretty much hasn't had any sort of really big time fights.
No, I mean, if you look at the Michael's point, Michael's point was that if you look at the records, I mean, a lot of those guys don't even have a win. He fought a guy back to back that was 0-8, and then he made him 0-9.
And from the few fights I've seen of him, from the few minutes I've seen of him, from the footage I've seen of him, put it that way, shorter in height and in length, arm length. Plus he's not much of a puncher. So what department does he really have over a Hooker? Is he a better boxer overall? I don't think so.
He doesn't have the experience. He's never been at the championship level. It's gonna be interesting. I don't know what to make of him, to be honest with you. He's probably a guy who, I don't know, they randomly selected or something. I don't know how they got him.
It seemed like they just put him in here as an optional easy defense. I'll just go to everybody else here. Gail, Jacob, Daniel, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. This is easy work. Very, very easy work. This probably LesPierre's one big shot. He's a local. He'll put butts in the seats. He's 34 years old, though. I mean, seriously, he hasn't had a knockout, it looks like, since 2014. Come on. we all know what's going to happen here. I applaud guys like Hooker when they can't get a decent fight, against a name opponent. Hey, they get in the ring. They give a guy a chance. He does have, at least on paper, an undefeated record. Clearly, there's either agents that know each other, or he's been a sparring partner and guys know him, or, there's some connection probably in the New York, gym scene that know him. And if he's a good guy, likable guy with a following who can sell tickets, he gets his shot. But we all know what's going to happen.
Do you echo the same sentiments, Jacob and Daniel?
calling an upset. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing. You know, to Gel's point, you know, I'm the same way. I like my fighter to stay active. You know, he had a rough fight with the Salcedo, so you know, like they say, sometimes you get the gimme fights right after a rough fight, because you don't want to end up like Francisco Vargas where you have 3 rough fights in a row and then you lose your belt. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a gimme fight. You know, I don't know how this guy got this opportunity. I don't even know where he's ranked. I don't know if this is like a Rod. What's that?
He's a southpaw.
No, I meant like where is he ranked? Like in any of the
I don't know.
organizations, but I don't know. I don't know if this is like a Rod Salka, gimme fight, or if it's just it is what it is.
I know at the time the fight was announced a couple months back, he was ranked outside the top. I want to say top 10. 13,
it shows 16th here on BoxRec, 16th out of 320. So I guess I mean it is what it is. But yeah, I think Hooker's gonna put this guy away.
He's a slickish southpaw. He uses a sort of the shell. He uses a shell style, and he boxes back with a forward. He got some skill.
I still don't think it's enough to beat the likes of Hooker. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
I'm about to say, like, yeah, I'm looking at this guy's presentation. Yeah, he's pretty. He's a slickster, like a southpaw. Like you have to be a pretty slick to fight a southpaw, to be a southpaw fighter in a way. But this is going to be academic in a way. Like, and
showcase
after
fight.
that fight was, yeah, it's going to be academic for Hooker in a way. And after the fight with Salcedo, it's an earned one. Like, cause obviously, like you're not going to get a big money fight because most of the other guys at 140 are in the World Boxing, either in the World Boxing Super Series, or in the case of Jose Ramirez, is with ESPN Top Rank.
Well, technically, big money fight. Okay, you mean he's not going to get a big name opponent because you got to keep in mind he got paid $1 million when he fought Salcedo.
Yeah,
$1 million.
No, but yeah, but we always have to, but we have to remember like what his reputation, what his perception was of Hooker before the Flanagan fight and B that Salcedo fight. Part of that is because remember he was with Rock Nation, and unfortunately, like Jay-Z knows how to make your hit record, but he doesn't know the boxing business for shit. So. In that sense, like I said, he wasn't really that well built, and he wasn't really that well regarded. It took the fights like Flanagan and that fight with Salcedo for him to get a little bit of a light and see that he is a really pretty versatile fighter and that has a pretty decent right hand. So I completely understand giving him this gimme. Like you got to keep yourself busy. But you got to position yourself now also for the next fight coming up, because one of the things about the World Boxing Super Series, love it, it does give you a consensus guy at the division right now. And that's either going to be Regis Prograis, Josh Taylor, Gary Relic, or even Ivan Voranchik. So you might as well position yourself one of those fights, especially when the World Boxing Super Series is also in the zone. So you might as well position yourself now, get yourself a gimme, and keep yourself active.
One more fight of note, Gil, going to talk about here. This is a surprise fight. Women's boxing here we're going to talk about right quick. We've talked about this woman in the past being one of the better fighters in the world. Delphine Pearson. She's defending her lightweight title against, if you follow on Twitter, you can't help but love her. If you follow on Instagram, you can't help but love her. Melissa St. Ville. Melissa arguably won her last bout, was a title fight. I can't remember the name of the lady she fought, but she knocked her down. Didn't get credit for knocking her down. Proved to be the difference in the fight. But getting back in there in a title fight against one of the best women's fighters in the world. Quick thoughts on that, Gail?
Yeah, what's nice about women's professional boxing for the fans is there are fewer women in each division at the highest levels. When you've got certain divisions in the men's division, when they're really flush with talent, you could have, a dozen guys. Light heavyweight's a good example of where there's just a depth of talent. In the women's various divisions, there are fewer what I would consider top or elite fighters, and so they have to mix it up with each other, or they have to cross divisions to get good fights. You just don't see a lot of the women ducking each other like the men do. This is a case in point. This is going to be a fun fight, action fight. You're right. These are women who have big personalities outside the ring. They're fun. They're relishing their time in the spotlight. Women's professional boxing is finally getting some attention from people other than its hardcore fans or the family and friends of the fighters. This should be an interesting matchup. This is one of those fights where it all comes down to whose version of the fight gets fought, whose game plan prevails. And I'm having a rough time picking this one. So I really think it is a true 50-50 fight. Who's going to be better on that night? And then do we get a rematch? And sometimes that's the bonus program with matchups like this. If it turns out to be as good as we think it'll be.
Yeah, it was 2 fights ago, not the last fight. It was 2 fights ago where Miss Melissa St. Ville fought Ava Wallstrom for the super featherweight title. Fought in Finland. Like I said, she should have been credited with a knockdown, and if she would have got credited with the knockdown, it would have been I think either a draw or 1-point win in her favor. But anyway, she's coming right back, fighting Delphine Pearson again Saturday in Belgium.
They're gonna be in Belgium, and unfortunately, we're all gonna have to search around for a YouTube feed or something like that. I can't see anybody showing us this fight. Now, what will be interesting is depending on who wins and who's available. You have one Michaela Mayer crawling her way up that division. And doing very, very well. Normally you wouldn't even consider putting Mayer in front of somebody like St. Ville, or Delphine. But
forget that.
For the women, they got to get it on because you just don't have a lot of worthy competition.
Forget that. If Pearson wins, they should be trying to get her in the ring with Katie Taylor. Period. Unify all the belts at 135.
Well, that's true. That's true too. Yeah, but you're on target in the fact that the women don't shy away from challenging each other, because the truth is there's very few other options for them, and the money isn't quite as good unless they're right at the top. So yeah, I'm all for it.
If what's the name? Old girl want to continue to be a weight bully down at 115, 118 pounds instead of staying in the weight that she belongs. Serrano, if she continues to want to be a weight bully instead of fighting at her true weight, 135, 140. Put Pearson in there if she defeats Melissa. Put Pearson in there against Katie Taylor.
I like that. Well, there's another reason I so object to what Serrano did. That is just the worst possible message you could be sending to other young women, to turn yourself into a skeleton, as an athlete. That is just not good for her. I can't believe she even was able to do it. And it's just not a good look for on any level.
Indeed. I think we're going to start to shut the show down on that note. If you like what you've heard this evening, particularly on YouTube, since doing this live on YouTube right now, the podcast will be up. Try to get it up later on this week. If you like what you heard on YouTube, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Want to thank Awakened Masters for joining us on the show. Thanks to him and his commentary. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Please leave us a review. It would be nice for the ratings. 5-star review will get read. Also, subscribe to us on SoundCloud, and trying to get the show on Spotify. Going to try to do it within the next month or so. So looking forward to have the show on Spotify soon. Going to go around the panel here. Didn't begin the show starting with ladies first because of some technical issues on her end, but we're going to end the show start with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk boxing, who want to Dancing with the Stars, Game of Thrones. The trailer dropped yesterday.
That's right.
Let the folks know where they can find. I'm just saying they better not
Yeah.
get rid of Arya.
Oh my God, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. But yeah, they want to put a scare into all of us. Yeah, pardon us, those of you who are not Game of Thrones fans, as the day crawls quicker and quicker to come. It's about 5 weeks away now, and we're all in just a feeding frenzy. But we apologize up front. You can find me focusing on boxing at Communities Digital News. That's COMM Digi DIGI News, comdiginews.com. And so glad to have you back again in the fold. What you need.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Yeah, my name is What You Need, and basically we just try to provide you things on boxing that sometimes people don't talk much about. So Boxers Not Talk Much About is one of our playlists, as well as small little things about learning boxing, trap setting, pivoting, and various things like that. Also, we direct you to different channels as well that also teach boxing, where you can actually get some cardio. It's good exercise and so on. We also have some other playlists such as Levels in Boxing and Bummy Records. And of course, see here, weight divisions, as well as we may talk about, my crowning jewel is Floyd Mayweather TBE, which is also another playlist there. But we just talk boxing. We talk about things that people talk about, current events, but we also talk a little bit about, of course, things people don't talk too much about in boxing.
Indeed. If you could check out What You Need. And for folks who want to hit directly with you, let them know directly where they can hit you up to talk boxing.
Oh, yeah. You can check me on YouTube. So I sometimes have chats like this. We have a little Google stream. And also, you can check me out. What You Need is the channel. Just type in WATTUNEED, as you see right here.
Jacob from Jab Hook. For those who want to talk boxing and film, since you are a frequent guest on the Wrong Real podcast, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, as always, Mike. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter at JRATM23, and also on jabhookboxing.com. I'm getting ready to release an article in defense of bringing back the 15-round fights. I think there's a case to be made for that, and so I'm going to be releasing that piece, so you can find that there. And yeah, I guest on a film podcast occasionally, but they have a ton of great guests, and they range, the films range from everywhere, from Italian masters to Japanese to anime to anything. So they have a lot of great topics. It's almost like a film class in itself, and get guests. So that's Wrong Real. You can find that on pretty much every single platform. And donate to the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. It's a good show. Mike puts a lot of effort into it, and the guests that he has on, from boxing media to just regular guys like me, I think everybody's respectful. They do a good job, and so if you can support him, help him out, that'd be great.
Appreciate that, brother. Appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, Daniel from the Inscriber. For those who want to talk boxing, and for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99. Tomorrow night I'll be doing my show with good folks for boxing.com, John Francis. Like I said, and catch my work on theinscriber.com, doing boxing, obviously NBA, a little bit of pro wrestling, and definitely we talk about next week because March is starting to fill up. Now we're going to have Mikey and Spence coming up real soon.
Indeed. For those who want to talk the sweet science with yours truly, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we will do a recap of Yarde in his fight against Travis Reeves, Daniel Dubois in his upcoming heavyweight bout, as well as the title defense of Shawn Porter against Ugas, the design card with Bivol versus Joe Smith Jr., Maurice Hooker versus Mikkel, LesPierre, and we may also do a recap of Delphine Pearson and Melissa St. Ville if we can find a feed for it. That's going to be extremely tough. And we will do a preview of Tevin Farmer. He's returning back into the ring. Tevin Farmer's fighting a lot lately, a whole lot. Old school mentality. He's fighting Joan O'Carroll in Philly, in his hometown of Philly. On the undercard of that, Katie Taylor going to be fighting Rose Valente. Gabriel Rosado's going to be fighting on that card, as well as Lucas Campbell. And the aforementioned Errol Spence, he's going to be defending his welterweight title against Mikey Garcia. A lot of talk about that. On the undercard, David Benavidez is going to be fighting what I think is a real showcase opportunity for Luis Nery, who's on the comeback trail, trying to restore his reputation. He's fighting McJoy Arroyo. Gail's favorite heavyweight, Chris Areola. He's going to be fighting on that Arlington card too. It's a really loaded card.
Buddy.
Charles Martin. So it's a lot of fights on there. So yeah. May also talk Michael Conlon. He's fighting the following day on an ESPN Plus card. So a lot of boxing we're going to be recapping and previewing. So this has been episode 243 of Pound for Pound Box Report. For Gail from Communities Digital News, what you need. Jacob from Jab Hook, Daniel from the Inscriber. I am your host, Michael. Again, if you want to find out all of the information about Pound for Pound Box Report, p4pboxreport.wordpress.com. All the links to where to find us on social media, where to find the podcast, as well as the donate buttons. Again, the donate links, I should say. Again, episode 243, Pound for Pound Box Report is in the books. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, man. Peace.
Bye.